Hello, you're listening to the Robot Wars History podcast where we chart the development of the show and the British robot combat scene in general by looking at key teams and bots. I'm your host Luke, and with me today is Nick.
Yeah, I am here. About 2 hours later than planned. I went to the shop. I do apologise, but we are now here to talk about Tornado.
And Space.
Hiya everyone.
And yes, we will be covering the second half of Tornado's career, stretching from Extreme Warriors 2 to Series 7. So let's just get straight on ahead here. We start off Extreme Warriors Season 2 with Tornado partaking in the International Championship. And given how this ends, I'm glad they didn't make the mistake of making this a war of independence.
I'm still not sure why this tournament needed to exist, to be honest.
They had a contractual obligation to fill a certain number of episodes, I guess. So Tornado's first opponent here is Wawa, and poor Wawa. Wawa is a very delicate machine. It's very much on about experimentation, and they just put it against the biggest, baddest bastard around.
Yeah, essentially, from what I understand, the first round for both Tornado and Razor were essentially what professional wrestling would define as a squash match. They were just given some really easy opponents to deal with, just to showcase how good they were. And yeah, it was kind of a waste of time, quite frankly, but what I will say about Robot is that I think its unreliability is highly overestimated. It did survive the whole match until it got pitted.
Well,
It did,
yeah,
but-
it's one of those things, isn't it? It had its back end crumpled by Killalot in Series 5, and then here it gets pummeled about the place by Tornado. It's not really like a reliable meter for judging reliability, so...
Yeah, Tornado does considerable damage.
Yeah, it does.
It completely mangles the back of Wawa. There's not really a lot to say apart from there is one funny bit where Wawa gets pushed into the sleepy set and Bash and Killalot just charge in from both sides. Just like no chance of escape.
The weird thing is about Robot is that actually, design-wise, it should be another one of those robots capable of beating Tornado. Simply grab it from the side, pick it up, and put it in the pit. And that's much
That's
difficult.
the difference between theoretically being able and any realistic.
Yeah,
chance of being able to
it's a
beat
bit of a
Tornado.
fight where in a fantasy setting, you might have a little awkward bandwagon for Wowot to do well. Bad shout out here to one of the recent fantasy fights I've heard about with Hypno-Disc and Bronco involved in a very close fight. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think it's time of recording. Hypno-Disc is leading on that.
Oh dear lord.
But yes, it's very much fantasy match where Warlock would pick up two votes. In reality, completely one-sided stomp. And then we move on to their third fight against Razor, and it's the debut of the cage.
It is, and
the infamous anti-Razor.
yeah, well, it's the cage.
ARD.
It's a cage, but it's not quite big enough yet to stop Razor getting really good
No,
grapples.
this is cage 1.0.
It is cage 1.0, but
It's even got a spinning disc instead of a bar
it's
spin.
kind of what makes this fight even better because it's very, very even. Because Razor can genuinely get in at the cage and that Tornado quite well, but obviously this also allows Tornado to do stuff itself. So it's probably the most back and forth fight Razor and Tornado had.
Yeah, I still can't believe Razor lost that. I mean, the judges admitted that they were wrong with the decision. I think they found some damage that Tornado had suffered.
Yeah,
and
dropped
they
out
realised that-
motor. Yeah, they attributed
Yeah.
it to Razor supposedly, but
Yeah, but I still think by the time that Razor actually grabbed hold of Tornado, it had won that match, essentially. It was the only real notable attack of the round, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the main thing the cage allows is it by giving something that's pushing up against the body of it, it allows Tornado to actually exploit
yeah,
its much superior drive power, whereas usually it just go right up the wedge. But yeah, because it's not big enough yet to completely keep Razor out of the main body of Tornado, Razor is still able to make this a very even fight, as you said. Under this motor, you get a bit of foreshadowing from Stephen Frank, learning from John Pierce here. So yeah, it's really a fight Razor should have won, but they didn't. So that brings us up to 2-1 in Razor's fate so far. In the great, I don't even know, quintology? Is that what you'd call it?
I don't really know, mate. I think you might be right.
We move, and then it moves on to finals against General Chomsalot, and we see the scoop. The scoop's back, and it completely nullifies General Chomsalot.
Yeah, Chomsalot's a handy little machine normally, and it's normally the one that makes it really awkward for its opponents. But here it gets General Chomsalotted, essentially, because there's just nothing for it to do. Tornado just keeps bouncing it around, and it can never get going. And I think if the fight was 10 minutes long and there were unlimited batteries, then Chomsalot still wouldn't have got an attack of note in here. And that's not to say it's a bad machine, but design-wise, as you say, it's a complete counter.
Well, I said even if they didn't even have the scoop on, it would have won, no doubt. The problem with this whole international championship, though, was that I don't understand why they put Razor and Tornado in there in the first place, because they didn't even have Panzer for the American side. Like, why have an international championship without Panzer? And yes, second of all, was it really much of an international championship at all? It was just British versus American machines.
Don't know when the airing would be, but I guess if the same station was airing Robot Wars, if this was before they aired the CV6 or something in America, it could just be a way to build up Razor and Tornado.
Yeah, maybe. I think Extreme Warriors 2 was filmed well before the other 3 Series 6 seasons, Series 6, of course, German Robot Wars, and Dutch Series 2. So that may explain the absence of those.
Yeah, I guess the presence of Wildwat kind of confirms that, doesn't it?
Oh, 259 versus Tornado. That would have been more interesting.
Yeah, and obviously Cat 3 was at Series 5 design here as well.
Not that it would have mattered anyway.
So, Tornado gets one of its less consequential trophies here.
Yeah, does anyone even remember what the trophy looked like? Was it just like the Robot Wars logo again, or did they get given a trophy? I can't remember.
I think it was just the logo.
The real question is, does anyone really care? It's just...
Well, me as part of the Tornado fan club definitely cares, mate.
Yeah, but it's just one of the biggest wastes of time in Robot Wars history.
Well, we then move on to the big season, Tornado's real star season, Series 6. Let's go. Melee's not exactly outstanding.
Tornado it's a thing.
Tornado does whatever it wants here.
Yeah.
Whatever it
wants.
It
completely just improvises the whole fight, really, because the other 3 are just such modestly okay machines. And honestly, any of these could have gone out, apart from Tornado, of course. And it was just a case of complete randomness, really, that killed off the 2 that went out, because Edgehog just got shattered by Matilda, and then, as we see later on, Terror Ball, when it looks like it's going to go through, just gets pushed down the pit, because nobody even thought they'd be in danger of going out, essentially.
Yeah, I can make a few observations about this fight. It seemed to me that the Tornado team were definitely trying to do damage limitation for this fight. They weren't really going all in like they did in future matches, because, it's a melee, and they knew that the other 3 machines weren't really up to scratch. And yeah, as I said, the Tornado team wasn't even intending to pit Terrible, from what I understand. It was just a complete misunderstanding, and they thought that Inshreddable was, immobilised when it wasn't. It was a bit of a clusterfuck. The weird thing is, though, is that Edgehog would later go on to beat Tornado in one of the Dutch competitions, which is quite incredible.
Here we go.
The Edgehog propaganda.
I'm not toast, so, and I'm not Gym Lad, so I don't really particularly care about Edgehog, but yeah, it is quite weird that of all the machines to have a win against Tornado, Edgehog is one of them. And there was actually one scene where I could theoretically see Edgehog winning, with an axe blow to the tyre again. It seemed one of the more capable machines of doing that, but alas, Matilda got in the way.
Yeah, if you look at the Ultimate Robot Archive, it has a lot of live event fights for Tornado, which rather than flatteringly leaves Tornado's ultimate win-loss record at something like 85-41. And yeah, because it's a live scene, you'll just find all kinds of odd losses, like losses to lightning and such.
Whether it's just the robot is obviously not trying to keep the robot in as good a shape for like the biggest tournaments, or just a random fluke happening because they have to do so many battles in a day or whatever, stuff like that.
But yeah, the casual way they just picked terrible at the end, it shows you Tornado could and did just go after everything here, because nothing in the melee poses any kind of...
Yeah, as Space said, it kind of just strolled through, did what it wanted to. And
in the second round, it's against 4, and yeah, this is another 5 out of 10 machine fighting a 10 out of 10. Tornado's just flaking off armor. It completely mangles the pincers. It looks at one point like it's like warping the entire chassis, just a complete curb stomp once again.
Yeah, this is definitely one of Tornado's fights where it's now up in the ante a bit. Like, it probably knows it can win this most of the time, but at the same time, 4's hammer can cause problems for Tornado, and in reply it, as you say, absolutely tears into it. Again, that spinner really is capable of just taking apart any slightly brittle construction, and the front claws go up, the panels come off, and there's a couple of really nice camera shots as well where Tornado really charges in on a couple of the exposed rams later in the fight. Oh, really good fighting. Growler gets involved as well. Proper good stuff.
Was this Tornado's most destructive win, by any chance? Because I can't think of too many fights where Tornado caused that much external damage.
The Pussycat fight's up there, the All-Stars one. But yeah, this is one of those where it absolutely takes every piece of 4 away in certain different areas. And it's a good one. It's never going to be a proper Hypno-Disc destruction fight, but for Tornado, it's a really good example of what it can do when it wants to.
I wonder how that 4 ended up afterwards. Definitely sure it never really did much after Robot Wars.
Yeah, maybe like half as good as Edgehog. You never know.
And then we get to the final of Anarchy, and we've got a new weapon alert. We're going to have a lot of these this episode. Tornado's really the Swiss Army bot of Robot Wars, isn't it? They had so many different setups, and this setup is just a big honking spike. Like, was this made specific? They should make this specifically for Anarchy or something, because I cannot imagine another robot that you'd design that for.
Would have been interesting to see Tornado use this in like every single fight. Like, imagine if the spike was its default configuration. That would be that would be a fantasy war and a half to do on the wiki.
I actually think that it harkens back to its Series 4 appearance.
A bit, yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. The Anarchy fight was one of those ones where it could have been better. Apparently, from what I understand, the 101 team, they didn't actually have much experience with Anarchy beforehand, and that is why apparently it sometimes misfired the flipper, which we saw, which is why Tornado was able to spear through the mechanics. And yeah, essentially, as every time that Tornado got through there, Anarchy just started to struggle.
Well, the thing is, like, Anarchy lands the first 2 flips on Tornado, and it really looks more like Tornado's kind of getting Anarchy's timing with it. But the reality is they didn't need the spike for this battle, because Tornado is powerful enough, and it's got so much of a speed and maneuverability advantage. It did not need the spike to control this fight whatsoever.
No.
I know Andrew Marchant talks about the axe being a worry, but realistically, I don't think Anarchy was ever likely to get that kind of axe blow unless Tornado left itself open to it, which it wasn't going to do.
Yeah, I understand why they used the spike, because, as you say, he was afraid of the axe, and he probably wanted a weapon with some range on it so Tornado could attack itself without getting in too close. And yeah, it is what it is. You get the complete JP over dramatics when Tornado prods at the internals, and yeah, like there's going to be an absolute combustion like Rapid v Carbide or something. But no, it's a good fight. Tornado, again, one of those where it doesn't get up to full speed and it isn't at full pelt, but yeah, there's only so much you could really expect from a Walker as good as Anarchy was for that type of class. It was always going to get outclassed really against Tornado, so...
I hate the idea of this being Tornado's anti-Walker weapon, just the thought of them looking at what had passed for Walkers.
Yeah,
up to them, thinking, "Ooh, we need to have something in our toolkit."
We redo the Series 3 Walker tournament on the wiki to include Spike Tornado. Yeah, I'm all for it.
I'm just
Mistruts v Tornado, Mammoth v Tornado, Anarachnid v Tornado. Oh yes, please.
Oh, and even the concept Hypno-Disc where they were planning to turn it into a Walker for Series 4. Just imagine.
Oh god, I forgot about that.
I didn't know that was a thing. Speaking of Hypno-Disc, we go into the semi-final, and I think, and this, if any, okay, I guess you could kind of say the All-Stars did, but if any fight showed that the Tornado was truly a new breed by now, this is it, and this is also like the complete vindication of the scoop. Tornado because Tornado shows how suffocating it can be in this fight. It is always on top of Hypno-Disc. It's always coming in from the side of Hypno-Disc. And we know now that you beat a horizontal spinner with a big fat wedge. But no one had really tried that. I guess you could say BMO, but that was hardly a healthy Hypno-Disc. No one had really tried that approach. And when Tornado tried it works completely. Hypno-Disc is helpless here, essentially.
Yeah, there's a couple of occasions Hypno-Disc gets side hits in on Tornado, and I think it does penetrate the like red bars on the side of Tornado, but as you say, for 95% of the fight, it absolutely slams it about the place. And the couple of like concentrated camera shots where Tornado's just ramming in on those little wheels of Hypno-Disc. It felt like they were going to break off at any moment.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Whenever we've seen Hypno-Disc beaten before, I mean, okay, Series 3, it's not exactly invincible Hypno-Disc.
Yeah.
Extreme, Hypno-Disc was very unhealthy. 4 and 5, they're basically flukes.
Yeah, it always seemed to have rather lame visual losses. Like, as you say, like, Behemoth, it just breaks down. Nasty Warrior, yes, that thing happened. Chaos 2, it wasn't working. Pussycat, great shot, but it's not being dominated for the full fight exactly. And
in TX 108, it didn't even move according to Craig Danby.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the first time we just see Hypno-Disc absolutely bullied around the arena the whole time. Like, it's funny that Hypno-Disc stands up to all the punishment for the reliability issues it's had in the past, but it does. And unfortunately, it can never really get going.
We do. Oh, go on.
The most incredible thing about this fight is that actually Tornado wasn't even intending to use the scoop at all.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to its website, it was actually going to use a whole new anti-spinner weapon, which was apparently cart tires with titanium plating attached to Tornado's chassis, with a lifter, which would probably have been helpful against Hypno-Disc. And yeah, that probably would have been even better against Tornado, so imagine that. But yeah...
I'm really glad we didn't get that, because that sounds like it would have looked incredibly goofy.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have looked very stupid. So I'm glad we got this. I mean, it bears with... I mean, for all Series 6 Hypno-Disc gets crapped on, per marchant, the scoop took considerable damage. So
yeah.
I imagine if this was like classic Tornado with just the drum setup, they probably wouldn't have survived. But no, they thankfully didn't sellotape a bunch of tires around them. They just went out there and bossed Hypno-Disc with the scoop. I'd love to see it.
And quite frankly, that was more impressive.
Oh yeah.
And, yeah.
Definitely. I mean, Who knows how the tyre thing would have gone anyway? Like, would they have been able to push Hypno-Disc around at all? Would the tyre thing have got in the way? I mean, do we even have a picture of how it looked or could have looked?
I don't believe so.
No. And this way was the more simplistic and probably the more effective way overall, to be honest.
Yeah, I do. It is interesting though that the Hypno-Disc team was so concerned about it that they actually had the design banned outright. Heck, even the Razor team weren't that unhappy with the anti-crusher frame, so that just gives perspective.
I feel like there's got some element there that just from a television perspective, Menton were more inclined to just ban that outright.
Yeah. Especially with the previous between Tornado and Razor, like, it's probably for the best that they let something like the cage go, but here, these two had never faced each other, and why not just let them go at it with their normal designs and see what happens?
Yeah. So we move on to the second semi-final against Dominator 2. Dominator's kind of a strange matchup because shape-wise, it's pretty much all broadsides.
Yeah.
But it's very quick on the turn, and the axe is a very constant threat. It doesn't end up mattering though, thanks to Matilda.
Yeah, I said Matilda and Dominator 2 had quite the feud in this era of Robot Wars.
Especially down in that corner as well, yeah.
Yeah, same corner as well. Oh, it was such an unfortunate end. As I said, it was really unfortunate that they just couldn't get the steering quite right, and they just ended up in the pit.
Yeah,
because that could have been an interesting.
It was
fight.
one of those like completely fluky moments where you can't even really say that the Dominator 2 team were at fault there. It was just everybody was going around however fast in the CPZ. You just try and adjust to what's happening. Matilda just reverses at a random moment and catches one of them, and then they have to spin around and get their bearings, and it's too late. I mean, this fight is one of those things where I do still think I prefer the outcome we got, and I say that as someone who loves Dominator 2, so I just think otherwise Tornado probably would have been all over those broadsides for even longer.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it does bear mentioning that the big hit until they got on Tornado, that was never properly fixed.
Yeah.
Apparently, Tornado's chassis is still like a bit warped to this day from that one.
Really?
Yeah, battle scars, as JP would say. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing just to mention here as well is that seeing as Dominator 2 struggled against Mid-Z, it wouldn't have stood a chance against Tornado, especially if Tornado equipped its anti-axe weapon device, which apparently was a set of kart tyres and a top frame attached.
Are we going to have like tyres for an anti-Fat Boy tin setup next? Come on.
Yeah,
I'm surprised they didn't go the whole Series 6 Sabertooth and just make a tyre load spinning disc.
Yeah, but as I said, it was one of the most pointless frames it would have had, to be honest, because no X-Bot actually came even very close to beating Tornado, as it turns out.
Yeah.
No. And so Tornado finally finds itself in a grand... Well, I shouldn't say finally, they've only had 2 series, but they do find themselves in a grand final against Firestorm, and this is just... And Tornado has the ground war won from the off. Despite getting their chassis warped so badly in the last fight that the scoop is visibly off the floor on one side, they've got the ground war won.
Yeah.
And it's an advantage that only widens as the soft wedge of Firestorm just gets more and more damaged.
Well, this fight is one where people often say that if Graham Bone just kept Tornado overturned after it got a flip in, then it would have won. But Tornado was that dominant beforehand that Firestorm needed to keep flipping it back over to get enough points to win. Otherwise, Tornado could have just played defensive for the remainder of the fight and got the win anyway if it was overturned. So,
yeah, Firestorm would need to get a pitting at that point, or like an Uta or something.
Yeah, Firestorm either needed to get the flip in immediately and set the tone there, or as you say, get a KO finishing moment. But in the period of the fight where he got the flip in, all he could really do was flip it back over. So
Yeah, I said that was the only way to properly score points,
Yeah.
and the only way really would have been an out of the arena. There was something I was going to mention here. Was yeah, I've just lost it. Sorry.
Well, I think it's also notable that when Firestorm does get the flip, it has to come in from the sides because,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, the wedge of Firestorm just is so compromised. It's why they came. The steel strip wasn't to make them the greatest ground clearance on Earth. It's because their wedge beforehand was susceptible to exactly this.
Yeah, and what I found out as well is that at one point, Tornado went over the top of Firestorm. A Firestorm tried to get underneath, but Tornado was going at such a full speed that it actually unbalanced itself, and Firestorm landed on its big fat bum. And yeah, essentially, it couldn't do anything. So yeah, even a flip would have been troubling, even when Tornado was inverted. It was just one of those opponents where Firestorm, I actually think, would have lost far more times than most people would realise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we move on to the big one, Firestorm versus Razor, and they have made the cage so much bigger. It's so huge in this fight. They opted for the bar, and the bar doesn't really do much damage. But what it's good at is knocking Razor to the side a lot, which allows Tornado to then capitalise on that.
As someone who wanted Firestorm 4 to win the title, I can say with an objective opinion that thank bloody God that Tornado equipped the frame, because if they didn't, this would have been one of the worst grand finals of all time. But instead, it became one of the best as a result.
Yeah, this would have absolutely been worse than the bigger brother one from the series prior is considered as one of the very weakest, and this would have definitely been worse than that, because at least with that fight, there was a little bit of narrative going into it. You know, bigger brother's war weary, it getting to the end is something. Here, we would have just had another Mercy killing, and that's about it. So,
yeah, if you want to know what that would have looked like, either watch the second Razor versus Tornado fight in Extreme, or watch Razor versus Firestorm in the All Stars in Extreme 2.
Exactly.
You don't want either of those as a final. You want this as a final.
Imagine
really
though, if Graham actually did finish off Tornado, and then Firestorm came in with a cage in the final. Oof.
Oh God. I mean, it's what really makes the difference here is that Razor ends up because before Razor gets wedged in on the angle grinder, it's still a bit of an even contest. But once they do, and Tornado is just able to slam them into submission, it's just scoring all the points in the world there.
You can just hear the dads in the audience going, "Hey!" every time Tornado comes in with a slam. That's why it's so funny. Razor's side panel starts to come popping off from its support strap beneath as well. There's some really big slams while Razor's pinned in there.
To give it some credit, though, it did survive.
Oh, yeah,
if it was
definitely.
Series 4, it would have broken down. So, yeah, credit to Razor for that. And then we get to the arguably the most infamous moment in all Robot Wars, perhaps. The whole Razor...
I don't think there's any arguably about it.
No.
Yeah. No. There's no argument.
But I wouldn't change it for the world either.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Razor grabbing and putting Tornado right on the pit, but not quite. And... in my opinion, I do agree that it was not a pit-in, for the reason being that Razor was essentially pinning Tornado. It wasn't pitting it, it was pinning it.
Exactly.
It couldn't free itself, so
problem
that doesn't count in my opinion.
As per normal, Robot Wars itself doesn't make these things clear, like, before the season starts. They don't clarify rules properly. You always had the drive on one side problems, or robots being freed from the arena wall problems, like... there wasn't consistency or pure clarity, so things like this happening would have absolutely drawn up controversy when it went the way it did in the end. But as you say, I agree with the rule that was in place. You know, Razor did have a grip and it didn't let go in time, and that's all good and fair, really.
Yeah, and so we get a very kind of happy result here of Tornado being the champions. It's not exactly the first new champion But it's like the first one that isn't like like a Series 1 and 2 like all-star
it's
champion.
every other machine from their very first appearance, you could tell they had to win the title at some point. First robot on the show, looked better than so much of the field. Chaos 2, again, it was always going to be in the top 2 of Series 3 at least. And yeah, but Tornado comes in as a good machine, don't get me wrong, but you felt in Series 4, yeah, this thing will probably get to the semis and not much further, but here it manages to break through that bracket, and for a boring machine, its Series 6 run was still very entertaining.
So that does beg the question, who or what could have beaten Tornado in Series 6?
Bigger
because
Brother.
Last episode...
Bigger Brother.
Bigger Brother, of course.
Bigger Brother.
We did theorise as well last episode that Behemoth could have potentially beaten Tornado, but given Behemoth's poor luck and reliability, it is a bit of a risky suggestion.
I think it's one of the better suggestions still, though, with its faster speed. Its design is good, and on a good day, it's one of the few machines I could see feasibly beating the Series 6 Tornado.
Yeah, and aside from that and maybe Razor, I really can't think of anyone else off the top of my head.
Not really, no. Because even something as great as Terahertz in Series 6, again, would have just got wiped aside, so... Yeah.
I said, some people think Dan Tomkia could have done
I think
it.
that's a good shout, to be fair, with the prongs at the front. That is a good counter to Tornado's wedge. Specific shapes there, and it did beat it on the live circuit as well, so that is a shout.
I think Tornado and Series 6 model Dan Tomkia basically just traded wins on the live circuit, so I'd be inclined to go Tornado there still. But yeah, Tornado becomes the champion. We move on to Extreme 2, and it's very rightfully in the All-Stars with Dan Tomkia and Terahertz, and it's a game of gang up on the dangerous one.
This fight's so sad.
It's so boring.
This could have been a really quite good fight if they all just attacked whoever. It really could have been, but instead they're both absolute cowards and take out my fave machine, because of course they do.
You know what I forgot? I forgot there was a spinning disc button.
Yeah.
Probably best left forgotten that one.
Imagine like if the spinning disc came back for the reboot and you had like you had that as an extra option. You either had the Pit of Oblivion, Roadhouse Robot, Fog of War, or the Disc of Doom for Series 11. Jesus Christ.
Oh, that would have been grand. The most disappointing thing about this fight really was that Dan Tomkia didn't even get the LG Arena after all that.
No, Terahertz finally runs out of CO2 and then it's just a limp flip over. It's just one of those really sterile fights where you have such good machines in there, but they play it so safe. Like, I understand why they want to get rid of Terahertz, but this could have been so good if they just attacked each other.
I think the even more frustrating thing was we didn't actually get to see Tornado versus Dan Tomkia in the end.
Yeah.
That could have vindicated it slightly, but yeah, that was the closest you got to seeing it.
Pretty much.
And it was tragic.
Yeah, and then Tornado suffers its first loss in a while against Bigger Brother. And really, this is just a testament to Bigger Brother fighting one of the best fights I've ever seen in Robot Wars. It's so patient, and it's very good at getting in on the side on Tornado, because Tornado definitely has the ground clearance advantage head on. But no, this is just an incredible fight by Bigger Brother, and a really bad error by Tornado in going for the pit.
Yeah, very true. Like, Bigger Brother was lining this specific pitting it got up in the end for ages. Like, they were always going for that clamp attack after a flip, and they carry it out really, really well, as you say, Luke.
Yeah, combining the ability to get underneath and flip of Firestorm with the ability to grab of Razor, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. And one of the fights where Tornado's selection of the scoop or the disc or whatever they want to pick is probably the wrong decision. With the spinner, they could have at least churned away at the armor and been effective either way up, but here it did just feel like a matter of time.
Do we know if...
Yeah, because I mean... Go on.
Do we know if Bigger Brother and Tornado frequently fought each other in the live events? Maybe that could have explained the choice behind the scoop.
Yeah.
Because it was one of the more baffling decisions, to be honest.
I think they were just confident. I think they were probably just confident in winning the ground war.
Yeah, they do. They obviously had a good record in flipper fights and ground clearance fights in general. So, yeah, I understand the reasoning, to be fair. But in the arena, it didn't really end up working in the end.
It does bear mentioning that even though Big Brother fight's a very good fight, the strategy is by no means a certain one, because it takes them a long time to get the flip, and then they have numerous failed clamp attempts. Like, they very easily could have run out of CO2 before they scored the clamp, and then would have just been Tornado on points. A combination of a good fight by Big Brother and a pretty bad tactical error by Tornado.
Well, I'm kind of glad that happened, but on the other hand, after that fight, the All-Stars kind of ran out of steam, really, because if you think about it, the final of that heat was between Bigger Brother and Firestorm 4, which Firestorm 4 dominated, and then it would go on to face Razor.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Did we need it to become an septology between Razor and Tornado? Or I mean, I think I'd probably give Firestorm 5 the nod over Scoop Tornado, because I think they probably have a better chance at winning the ground war without their wedge getting turned up.
It all depends when they have the chance of the first flip. Because against Storm 2 as well, Firestorm very nearly got an immediate flip off. So it's one of those where if it gets it in, it can change the tide and set the tone. But I think generally, I'd still probably back Tornado and those type of machines to still be too much for Firestorm. But it would have been better, yeah.
Well, yeah, because Firestorm's steel strip kind of broke off against Storm 2.
Yeah,
so
it's the problem of Firestorm. It's unlike the other flippers, when it gets something overturned, if it can't really punish it as easily if it's invertible. So,
very little to say about the challenge belt. Terahertz is probably one of the worst bots for Tornado to face, because it's because without all those cart tires on top, it's really got no defense against an overhead weapon, especially not something like Terahertz. So it just goes immediately for the pit and gets it. Which
can't blame
very
it, yeah.
sensible, if very boring.
Yeah, it's one of those where if Terahertz had massive tires itself, it might have had more of a chance of staying on the arena, but the second Tornado even slightly prizes underneath it, it can just do what it wants with it, because it just can't get any traction. And as you say, it puts it in the pit before the pit's even fully descended, really.
Yeah, I said I think John Reed's reaction kind of summed up everyone else's reaction.
Yeah,
all the hard work for absolutely nothing.
It was such a good episode up to that point, but yeah, this is one where I can't blame Tornado for being as cynical and boring as it was, really.
The thing is, though, is that I know some people are thinking maybe they should have done the proper challenge belt series, where Tornado faces them one by one. But then look at the opponents it would have faced. I mean, Barbarous would have been the easiest machine in the world to push around. Vader, same thing really. Hypno-Disc is already beaten. Iron Ore, maybe, but its flipper wasn't the greatest. It needs to be at
Iron Ore is so cumbersome as well on the long side.
Yeah, Tornado would run rings around that.
So Chromalot, not a chance. I said Smitzy, it's essentially worse version of Tornado. So yeah, it's really between Dan Tomke and Terahertz.
Yeah, I mean, at this stage of Robot Wars as well, most of the All-Stars fights with Tornado would have been rematches, so I much prefer having the Extreme 2 format set up of the Challenge Belt.
Yeah, given the format of the Challenge Belt, if you just had Tornado fighting one after another in an episode, that'd be awful.
Yeah, because the longer it went on, the more you would have been like, well, Tornado's just not going to lose, is it? But then imagine if it lost like the second fight, and then, I don't know, by the final fight of the episode, you have Barbarous on one win. It's like, well, where do you go next then with the challenge belt? No one really owns it, bar like half barbarous.
That would have been grand. What they really should have done is they should have done it where Tornado faces another title challenge belt holder, similar to what they do in professional wrestling. Sometimes they try and crown an undisputed champion.
Yeah.
So you have someone else, hold their own title belts, maybe Bear off again, maybe Chaos 2 or Barbarous even, and whoever is holding the belt by the end gets to face Tornado later on in the competition.
I think that's basically kind of. I mean, by having Terahertz win,
they essentially
match,
did have
basically what they did.
Yeah, they essentially had like a shadow challenge belt there for Terahertz, I guess. Yeah,
maybe.
So Tornado closes off its Extreme 2 campaign with the European Championship, and it fights three very dangerous crushers. Its first fight against Snakebite, for some reason Tornado forgoes the cage here. It's just a classic Tornado domination of a slow, big machine.
Yeah. You can tell that they're still somewhat worried about facing a crusher though, because they don't bring out the spinner against, which is in general a rather low tier machine. They don't want to risk going up that wedge.
Here's a question. Were any other crushers other than Razor worthy of Tornado equipped in the anti-crusher frame? Because
not really, no. Because they probably think Razor's just got that good a wedge that they can't out-wedge it with the scoop, whereas any other of those crusher-type setups they can probably out-wedge, so...
Yeah, Tornado would just bully Tiberius really badly.
Yeah.
Would not be competitive.
Tiberius is definitely strong enough to get through the top mind, but yeah, they wouldn't really get the chance to.
Yeah, they've got too small of a wedge. It's kind of the main weakness of this Tiberius, to be fair.
So we move on to the final fight with Razor, and by now Razor pretty much has the cage sussed out. Like, they get a hold of Tornado very quickly. And then we get a very curious rest of the fight. Because the cage, you think by Extreme 2 they probably would have sorted the whole thing about the cage being too big to get into the pit, because it is blatantly way too big to get into the pit. But Razor is just straining, trying to get Tornado in, completely burns itself out.
We don't even get a true chance to see Razor properly put it in the pit, because it just does burn itself out before it even reaches there.
Yeah, but Tornado is still perched on top of the claw. So,
and then we get the absolute. We get the absolute mess that follows of the Razor team forfeiting their win, where really it should have just been counted out because it didn't get going. It burned itself out. If Razor was working properly, it probably would have been able to just, park it over the top of the pit and there you go. But here, it does technically break down.
That would have been so great. Imagine if Razor came through and all of a sudden had to withdraw against Philippa, giving Philippa the win.
Oh, that would have been the most Philippa thing of all time, that. Oh, it would have been the true way to top off Philippa's absolute chaos that it causes.
Oh, that would have been incredible. But
I don't blame Team Tornado here for the cage or anything. But
no.
Like I said, I feel like the rules should have caught up to the cage by now. Like, because it does cut to a spot where you see the diameter of the cage is bigger than the pit. So it just seems like a very poor oversight on the behalf of whoever's making the rules.
Well, that's the thing as well. Like the true hardcore Robot Wars fans that know the rules inside out would have been like, yeah, Razor had to let go of its grab in Series 6 and it would have won, but to 90% of the viewers, well, more than that, and even the show itself and the way they portray it, like JP, he obviously says that's too big for the pit as well. He has no clue that they just needed to let go in Series 6 to win, so to most of the people watching, it still does look like it's cheating, essentially, and that's probably the narrative they wanted because it makes more dramatic TV, but as you say, it really is. It's just a mess at this stage, the whole thing.
Okay, so they forfeit, and let's look at this now, because this is if you're looking at rivalries and Robot Wars, this feels like the only really legitimate high level one, unless you want to go into like Eruption versus Carbide or whatever. Let's look at this, right? So on paper we have 3 Tornado wins, 2 Razor wins. However, I'm going to do some revisionist history here. 2 clear Razor wins, 1 dodgy judge's decision that I think even the judges said should have gone to Razor, and then 1 clear Tornado win, and then whatever you want to do with this one. I think Razor's got the better of this rivalry.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, very much so. Well summed up, mate.
Though I will say though that the Tornado was so strong that it actually killed off the Razor team.
Yeah, I guess you're not wrong.
The ultimate.
Razor being knocked out of Series 7 by Tornado as well, then that's another Razor win in the rivalry.
Car. So Razor goes out, and we go on to, as Nick said, Philippa, and Tornado goes for the disc here, and I want to posit that this is purely because it would be the most Philippa thing in the world for them to flip Tornado over and get them in the pit. It absolutely would. If any bot could have beaten Scoop-Nado at this point, it would have been Philippa. No, but honestly, before I started rewatching all these, I kind of forgot that we ever saw the disc again.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's just constantly Scoop-Nado from like the Hypno-Disc fight onwards. But yeah, as it is, Tornado has very little difficulty in just overwhelming Philippa.
Yeah, I think my favourite part of this fight is when Philippa's entire back right panel just drops off randomly. That was quite funny.
Well, here's something else to consider. At least Philippa 2 not only won the Belgium crown for this tournament, but also the Dutch crown because it outlasted Pulverizer.
Yeah.
There we go, king of the Low Countries.
Yeah, that's the most Philippa thing of all time as well, yeah.
Yeah. What I will say as well is that, you know, the fact that Tornado versus Razor happened in the semi-finals, I wonder if they were clearly planning a different final altogether, because it seems to me that they were going to try and have Razor versus Black Hole as the final.
Oh, that would have been, well, yeah. I mean, who knows what it would have been like, but, you know, just the prospect of having Black Hole in there would have been so good.
Yeah.
Mate, imagine Razor going up against Philippa and it burns out in the process of killing him. Imagine that.
I'm still wondering whether Razor would have been even able to compete.
No, I mean, who knows? Who knows, yeah.
So, yeah, Tornado leaves the European champion for whatever the hell that's worth. And we move on to Series 7, where Tornado is very wisely the first seed, and very wisely not the first episode, because this is kind of a dud.
Oh, this episode was such a disaster. And it was actually one of the first episodes I ever watched as a child. And yeah, as I said, as the biggest Barbarous fan of all time, this was quite a bitter episode, to say the least.
I mean, the melee is basically just like the Series 6 melee.
I was literally going to say the same. It is just Series 6 melee all over again. It can just kill off whoever it wants it.
Yeah. So, yeah, this was an interesting little battle because essentially Tornado just absolutely destroyed any chance of Devastator being taken seriously, because Devastator was meant to be this brilliant robot, but alas not.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to see Tornado treat Devastator like it was Pete Hypno-Disc, but you know.
Yeah, shockingly didn't need the scoop for that one. Yeah, there's not much to say about the melee, and there's not a lot to say about the next fight with Leveler 2.
Oh, really, mate? Leveler 2, come on.
I completely disagree. I would say that Leveler 2 proved that Tornado was actually a very entertaining robot in Series 7, because Leveler 2, for those who don't know, was very inexperienced at this time.
And Nick's favourite robot,
Kind of dominated a bit by Tetanus Booster, and perhaps should have been dominated by Barbarous, but, you know, reliability and all that. But even Leveler 2 proved that Tornado wasn't actually invulnerable for this series, achieving a cheeky little flip on Tornado that showed the Series 1 champions had a lot to worry about in terms of defending its title.
That's a charitable way to no, that's a charitable way to paint 2 flips and being completely dominated until the pitting. Yes.
my level 2 propaganda is spreading. You love to see it.
Well, I'm not saying that Level 2 would have won this, because clearly he wouldn't have ever won this.
Aww.
But it does show, though. It proved that had Tornado faced some of the other flippers in Series 7, Atomic, Tsunami, it would have stood no chance at all.
I would have loved to see it against
I think that's pretty safe to say. Yeah. The next fight is against Tetanus Booster, and this fight is just Tetanus Booster slowly dying while Tornado does whatever it wants with them. They're just slowly burning out.
This is one of the most forgettable heat finals in a while. Like, I think most fights from this heat are perfectly okay. Like, nothing more than like a 5.5 out of 10, but they're okay. But this fight just doesn't have anything about it, really.
I'll give Tetanus Booster some credit, though, because apparently Tetanus Booster actually broke Tornado's lifting scoop. Yep, this was a whole new little scoop that was meant to, lift opponents, but it didn't. So theoretically, Tornado should have been disqualified for not using an active weapon.
That would explain, because I was gonna. There are fights later on in this where you'd think they might have quit with the lifting scoop. That would explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nick, like you said, I don't often see this episode cited as the worst of Series 7, but it's probably the least memorable, and yeah, that's why for as little of the shit seemed to go into the production and the general production and airing of Series 7, they very wisely didn't put the champion seat first up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still wondering what the logic was behind this whole heat. I mean, seriously, arguably perhaps the most notable robot aside from Tornado was Barbarous, and what the hell was Barbarous going to do against Tornado? Seriously.
Yeah.
The most entertaining battle. Yeah, the most entertaining battle wasn't even in Tornado's heat. It was that little featherweight competition battle, which is by far one of my favourites of all time. Yeah.
Think it was just a standard easy ride for the champion heat.
Not an entertaining one.
The semi-final one kind of continues the kind of odd nature of Tornado's opponents, because it's Raging Nightmare who are incredibly lucky to get there, and Tornado just shows them that there's levels to the game.
Yeah, there's a few flippers that are very refined in Series 7, and Raging Nightmare isn't quite one of those that's going to trouble Tornado. It doesn't even go in with the wedge in this one. That's a rare thing for Tornado against a flipper.
No, it's just complete contempt. Like, the best way to describe this battle is Tornado just beats Raging Nightmare to death.
Yeah, and it's Spinner gets in some really nice little hits on the thin aluminium checker plate armour.
Yep, perfect opponent for Tornado to be, really, with the disc. But here's the big what if. What if Spawn Again faced off against Tornado? Because I would argue that Spawn Again actually stands a very good chance of beating Tornado, as long as its flipper doesn't explode.
I do like Series 7 Spawn Again, but I don't think it's quite at that level. I do still think its sides are too long. Tornado would have moments of domination against it. I like the idea of Spawn Again being really competent at a high level against a very hard to beat opponent, but I don't quite think it would be able to even at its best.
Yeah, just on its track record, I can't discount that the flipper will explode, something else will go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, Spawn Again even let Rocks get in behind it in Series 7, so...
Yeah, I was going to mention the Rocks thing. Yeah. The only way I think Spawn Again could have done it is if it achieved a lucky flip at the start and then achieved a chip-like out of the arena. That was incredible, that out of the arena. But that was been the only way it could have been Tornado, I guess.
Yeah, it would have been better than what we got here, probably, but...
Yeah.
I mean, Tornado then goes on to fight one of those scary new flippers of Series 7. And, man, that flail seems like a bullshit weapon just to justify using Scoop, but it actually works here.
Yeah.
they managed to pierce gravity's wheels, and it doesn't immobilize gravity or anything. Gravity's still moving around competently, but it does hinder them. And
Yeah.
yeah, more importantly, Tornado just has the ground game won completely.
Yeah, and the thing is, as you say, the tyres do get absolutely compromised here, and if they weren't, let's say if Tornado didn't try and take out that obviously intentional approach, then when Tornado eventually got flipped over, Gravity would have had more manoeuvrability and time to set up a true out of the arena attempt. The one it went for in the end was just kind of an opportunistic one on the turn near the flame pit when it was just bobbling around, so it was a really good thing they took out the tyres beforehand, because if not, I think they could have lined it up and got them out, to be honest.
Probably, yeah.
You know what this battle reminds me of? Tornado's win over Gemini, because it was actually Gravity is actually a flipper that I think could beat Tornado once or twice.
Oh yeah,
but every time it keeps wheeling, it's just essentially we might as well have had a sign at the back of it saying "kick me." Every time it kept wheeling up.
Yeah.
Just why would you need to invite Tornado to get underneath you?
Gravity is definitely has the most raw power of the flippers in Series 7, but to face Tornado one-on-one, raw power over precision milled scoops, it doesn't really always offer the best route of beating Tornado, so this was probably one of the better of the more powerful Series 7 flippers that Tornado could have faced for its attempts, because it has the tyres to attack. As you say, it wheelies a lot, so even then, Tornado had its moments of worry here, so I do think it shows, as you say, against an Atomic or a Tsunami, it could have really been in trouble.
Just quickly, I can hear a mouse wheel going repeatedly. I'm just concerned in case that... Oh, yeah, just concerned in case that shows up on the recording.
Yeah, it probably will do, but I kind of think... I think I've only heard it when Space hasn't been talking, so hopefully it shouldn't be too bad to edit out. We'll see. It probably will be a nightmare, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so Tornado manages to win against Gravity, and it moves on to the grand final, and it meets Storm 2, and Storm 2 is just a better Tornado.
Yep.
It's faster, and more importantly, it's got a more capable weapon in the lifter. Now, Tornado has it's not a complete washout, because there's not really that great a difference in terms of the ground clearance advantage. Both of them get under each other pretty evenly, and Tornado has like the vestigial advantage of Andrew Marchant's probably a better driver than Ed Hoppet. But I mean, Storm 2 is more explosive, and that 4-bar lifter is so much more capable a weapon than anything Tornado can get, because Storm 2 isn't Firestorm. Once it's able to get Tornado over, it doesn't need to flip it again to get its points. It could just slam Tornado around, which is pretty much what happens here.
Absolutely. And that does bring an interesting point, though. Considering Tornado's vulnerability to being flipped when it has the scoop, I still wonder why the team never considered, adding a Shreemec of sorts to Tornado when that happened. Probably
wasn't any weight left over.
Yeah, that's the thing, because they use the scoop defensively as well. Like, it's a very thick scoop, isn't it? Like, as you say, ideally they would have, like, a little Shreemec, or even, what's the machine in Classic BattleBots called? Is it Bad Attitude, which has the wedge, the normal wedge at the front, and then it has an inverted wedge, so when it goes over, it's still got a wedge on the floor. But as you say, it probably is wedge related. Weight related.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, I guess, because they so often win the ground war, and usually I guess they might also think that if we get flipped, then our Shreemec is the other bot flipping us back over.
Yeah, it's just the risk you have to take. Yeah, because they probably could have made themselves less effective with their primary strategy of that amazing wedge if they tampered with it somewhat. So I guess it's the risk you have to take.
There is
Yeah,
one...
I mean, it just...
Oh,
Go on.
hang on. Is where you're going to talk about the thing, or you're going to move on?
What for...
Yeah,
I was going to talk about the...
it.
I was going to talk about... but no, it is just... I think it really is just the fact that Storm 2, it's got all of Tornado's virtues, and it does just have a far more effective weapon. Like, the most effective weapon we've seen from Tornado with the scoop is the lifting scoop, which is very small and broken, and the chain flail, which is not going to bother Storm 2 in a million years.
No.
I'm not going to justify the whole pitting thing with a discussion because it's very stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
So
I'll
we'll
say
move
on
on
that
to-
is that Refbot shouldn't have pressed it in the first place, and that's about it.
Yeah, I said
So-
it didn't really matter because I said Tornado was clearly out and about really with that.
Yeah.
But I would like to see the full uncut battle. Please, someone find it.
Would be nice.
Andrew Marchant, do you have it?
At andrewmarchant@gmail.com.
Well, the Team Tornado website is still up, so
Oi, oi.
get that cheeky admin at teamtornado.co.uk or whatever.
Sliding in those
Um,
DMs.
But no, Tornado loses the judge's decision, and it has its third place fight with Exterminator, and Tornado just lost to Storm 2. Exterminator just lost to Typhoon 2, so you can guess which one's in the worst state here. Exterminator is so damaged it can't even put on the wedge. Like, the wedge was completely torn off so violently it can't be put back on. So that gives you an idea of how healthy Exterminator is in this fight.
Yeah, this was kind of unfortunate because I think Exterminator could have actually proven to be a very serious threat for Tornado if it was in 100% condition. And I would argue it was actually one of the best robots to take out Storm 2 because I think Storm 2 was actually a bit more fragile compared to Tornado, at least by the scoop. So one hit from the disc probably would have buckled it. But yeah, this Exterminator wasn't going to do anything here.
I do love Series 7 Exterminator. It's such a evolution of its old designs, but compared to all the other grand finalists here, I still think it was a bit of a level below.
I can see it beating Tornado purely because it had a good scoop. So if it won the ground war and it scored some hits on the Tornado scoop, it could start to compromise it like that. But that was never going to happen here because the disc is barely working. After a big hit from Matilda, Exterminator pretty much just dies.
Yeah, and also apparently, according to Exterminator's team, the disc actually suffered tons of damage in terms of, I think it was like thousands of pounds worth of damage from that one Matilda blow. So that just gives perspective. Yeah.
So yeah, Tornado. What comes out of Series 7 with the bronze medal, and it has one more. It has one more fight in the Third World Championships. I guess. Thankfully, they didn't put it in All Stars because that would have just been boring, really. Although maybe if it ended up Tornado Dantum Kia, that could have been interesting.
Yeah.
But instead, we get Ansgar for Storm 2 and Tornado. And this is a case where I don't mind them teaming up because get that piece of trash out of here. I want to see Tornado and Storm 2 at it again.
Yeah, and the fight we got between the two was really, really good. Really close, actually.
Yeah, it's way more competitive.
I liked
think
Ansgar 3.
Yes, that's all we need to know from that. Ansgar 3 should have won this fight. Get rid of those two. Who would it face? Oh, Ansgar v Toughest. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously we don't see it all, but kind of what helps make this more even is just where the two bots are at when they finally decide to start going at each other. Because Storm 2's kind of open to Tornadoes for Tornado to get in on the side. I think what you see here is Storm 2's power kind of working against it a bit because it's more liable to go on those mad charges that miss, and it's got to correct. And then Tornado was able to capitalize on that because Tornado was incredibly well driven and very maneuverable. And Tornado's able to get him into the CPZs and such. it's really just Storm 2's weapon that ends up making the difference again.
Yeah. So yes.
Yes.
So I will actually argue that this battle actually decided the world championship, because if Tornado had won that one, it would have probably beaten Tough as Nails.
Yeah, it would have been pretty much an
And
identical
I
fight.
think it would have actually had an easier time against Supernova than Storm 2, because again, Storm 2 is more fragile than Tornado. As we saw against Hypno-Disc, Tornado can actually easily beat a spinner like that.
Yeah, Storm 2 is a better version of Tornado, but it's not leagues better. Tornado could have easily beat Tough as Nails and Supernova.
Yeah, I will say though that Tornado was a UK and a European champion, but it was never a world champion. So I'm sorry, but you're only a continental champion, Tornado. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, you're not one of the all-time greats.
You're basically Sergeant Meekle now, then. Not good enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the end of Tornado and Robot Wars. Now, after Robot Wars, Andrew Matcham was already considering retiring Tornado because the level of competition in the UK was leveling up, and Tornado was rather fragile machine. He intended it for one last run in an intended Fighting Robots Association World Championship in 2004. But after that event was cancelled, Tornado was pretty much retired from serious competition. It would compete in friendly battles, exhibitions, whiteboards, and that kind of thing. Kind of related to, I guess, circling back to Extreme 2 very quickly, one of the reasons Tornado was retired was because of terahertz. Bots like terahertz were just so powerful and damaging that, Tornado couldn't really stand up to them.
Yeah, good time to retire
Tornado,
it, really, yeah, I do agree.
Yeah,
very good fundamentals,
Tornado,
but over time, the base chassis and the exposed tyres, and it would have all just come together, and it would have lost to the better flippers that became more precision milled just shortly after Series 7. So, yeah.
If you look at the kind of win-loss record, from like 2005 going onwards, there's more losses than wins. Andrew Marchant didn't end up entering the reboot, mostly for various reasons. Location, very little timing, pretty much would have had to build a new machine. But Tornado still lives on as kind of a display piece. I think it's fought as recently as 2016. And that's pretty much the end of the Team Tornado story.
Yeah. There is actually one interesting little thing I want to add on here, is that did you know before Tour 1 entered the competition, I think it was Series 10 if I remember rightly, not quite sure, but yeah, it was actually tested by having Tornado continually slam against it.
Yeah.
And to give credit to Tour 1, it did hold up, so there we go. How would Tornado have done in Series 8? Because we do know that some machines did, eagerly compete, Thermidor 2, Razor, and stuff like that.
Very poorly.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen
Tornado
just for one nostalgia one, though.
I don't know
like
why
the Hypno-Disc.
It would have been nice, but if people took badly to Storm 2, then Tornado would have to go defensive in the reboot. It would basically have to use its wedge again, or chuck the blimmin' variation of the frame back on to try and get in the competition, because aside from one or two little melees or matchups, yeah, I think as Luke said, it would have been pretty sad.
Yeah. I don't think I think it's fine seeing Tornado like appear in the odd video where it's like fighting over kind of old bots or fighting Tauron in someone's driveway. Apart from that, I think that's all we need to see from Tornado nowadays.
Yeah, I agree. It had basically the perfect type of shelf life. Like, it was always competitive on the show, and then when it started to slowly be bested, it was still very good itself. It wasn't like a Chaos 2 or Hypno-Disc exit from the show. it was still very competitive until the end, and then they decided, now's the time to close the chapter type thing. So yeah,
and also didn't have the disastrous Razor ending.
Yeah, exactly. They had basically the perfect shelf life.
So now's the time where we talk about what is our favourite tornado fight. I'm going to give two answers here. I'm going to give my favourite tornado fight and my favourite tornado performance. Now, my favourite tornado fight, it's the Series 6 Grand Final. It's always going to be. My favourite tornado performance, however, for that I have to go the fight against Hypno-Disc, just because it's the first time that anyone. I think it's really the only time we ever saw Hypno-Disc just completely bossed like that, like while healthy and not a fluke shot. And just very quickly, when I say rewatching this made me appreciate how much fun the Rambots were in Classic Robot Wars. Nowadays I don't. Nowadays I find kind of Rambots kind of boring. I think mostly because like very powerful drivetrains, we kind of expect them. I'm not the kind of guy who enjoys watching, for example, Robo Games fights where Original Sin just murks everyone year after year, it just suffocating them. But I think because Tornado's power seems so unique in those early events, it makes it so much more exciting to watch.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with the best fight you said there and your favourite fight and the summary of Tornado in general. I completely agree. It's very easy to call it boring just by default, and yeah, it did have some very average fights in there too, but so did every All-Star, and some of the best fights we got from it were brilliant driving, brilliant consistency from the bot itself, and it was just a good, consistent rammer based on really good fundamentals, and definitely worth its place on the show.
Yeah, I'll say though that my favourite battle had to be Tornado versus Wee Big Cheese, simply because it was just so violent, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Best performance? Oh, that's a good question. I'd actually put it as one of Tornado's wins against Razor, quite frankly, because not many robots can officially say they beat Razor on that basis alone.
Yeah, so I think that pretty much finishes up here. Thank you for listening. I've been your host, Luke, and from me, Nick, and Space, goodbye.
Goodbye.
See you soon.